Good evening, council members. It is now 7 o'clock. I'll read the statement that is at the beginning of your agenda this evening. The mayor has announced that he will not be present for this work session or the special meeting on the 28th. There is currently no appointed mayor pro tem. City code requires and allows the council to appoint a presiding officer to conduct those meetings at this time. The presiding officer is selected by nomination and approval of a majority of the council. At this time, the council can, in fact, nominate and approve a presiding officer to preside over this meeting and the meeting on June 28th. That concludes staff report on this item, council members.
I would recommend that Councilmember Townsend serve as our presiding officer for this meeting and the next. He's been mayor pro tem, he's got experience in this, and it makes sense.
Are there any other nominations for presiding officer?
Does Councilman Townsend accept?
Does Councilmember Townsend accept the nomination if approved by the council?
I was going to ask if I have to accept. Yes, I accept.
By agreement of the council, then, you are currently the presiding officer, sir. The meeting is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holman. Thank you, fellow council members, for appointing me as the presiding officer for this and the next special session. With that, then I'll move on into the agenda item. Mr. Fearborn, I turn it over to you for the first agenda.
I would suggest, sir, that you officially call the meeting to order.
Rules. Yes, this is is now 7:05, and we'll call the official City Council work session for June the 7th to order. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn for the agenda for the evening.
Thank you, sir, and I will slide it over to Mr. Cataret.
Thank you, sir. This evening, Mr. Jeff Beckler, who represents Zimmerman Properties, is back before you again. Mr. Beckler's been here for the previous 2 years. He's going to give you an update on a proposed project as referenced as Grant Park Villas. It's a 55 and older community that is proposed for about 3.8 acres just north of 58 Highway off of Adams Street. The property is currently owned by the applicant and is properly zoned for a apartment community. He is here this evening as they are going to resubmit their application for funding through the Missouri Housing Development Commission and specifically requesting a resolution of support from the council. But I'll let Mr. Beckler go through his presentation.
Thanks, Jim. Presiding officer and council, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak before you again. I'm probably going to be a little bit rusty. You know, it's been a while since I've been in front of council, but it's good to be back to a little bit of normal. Third time's a charm. We're still proposing Grant Park Villas. My organization, again, feels so strongly about this project and its location and Raymore that we've actually purchased the land, which is a little bit it's a lot out of our wheelhouse. We don't usually land bank land. We usually try to get our deals funded and pushed through before we actually own it. But so my principals feel really strong about this project, and I'm doing everything I can to make it even more competitive this round, and I can allude to that in just a little bit. So we are proposing 48 units of 55 and up senior housing, elderly housing. First off, I'll try to be brief. I don't want to be redundant because you guys have heard me squawk before, but Zimmerman Properties, we're based in Springfield, Missouri. We own and operate now in over 15 states. Our property management arm, Will Hoyt Properties, we manage over 15,000 units now across the Midwest and Southeast. We own and develop over 100 projects, and like Jim alluded to, we've been involved in the federal LIHTC program since its inception, and we're applying to the Missouri Housing Development Commission for Grant Park Villas. We do have a local connection as well, Briar Creek Villas, Lakewood Terrace in Belton, And we also constructed and we manage Ridgeway Villas here in Raymore, and that is a family community. Excuse me. These will be 2-story apartments, a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. We'll have a full slate of amenities for the residents. I had mentioned earlier about trying to be even more competitive in the eyes of Missouri Housing Development Commission. In years past, it's been very, very subjective. They've kind of leaned towards a more point scoring system to where you score this, you get awarded, you're 2 points shy, and that's really new. So we're exploring partnerships with a partnership with West Central here in town. It's right across the street from our site. We feel really strong about that. We actually have a call this week with them to kind of finalize those details, and that'll get us to another set aside in the competition arm of this, which will make us even more competitive to have that community housing development organization / CHODO connection with that West Central offers. So that's going to give us not only a more local connection, but a few more points in layman's terms that makes us even more competitive. So I'm really excited about that. I think it really makes Grant Park Villas stand out more than several similar projects, as you know, in the KC Metro. And there's some brief schematics that you all have seen before, and I'm sure you have in front of you. If you have any questions, feel free to just stop me. Last year, I think it was last year, they're kind of blending together now, Jim, but there was some questions on how we maintain our portfolio, so I wanted to include that again, some past projects that we have to maintain. We get inspected all the time through the federal side, through the state side, through our investors' side, and it really holds us accountable as far as maintaining our projects that we get approved. There's a couple more there. Grant Park Villas, will be elevator buildings. So 100% of the units will be visitable, and 3 of the Grant Park Villa units will be fully accessible. That's not just a requirement. I think it's just 1 unit that's required, but we always try to, that's a big deal, to be fully accessible. And also Wilhoit Properties will make any reasonable accommodation should a resident need one. We take our safety very seriously, and this was another issue that came up last year or the year before, so I just wanted to include it again that, any type of negative situations we take very seriously. It's always reported upon. We play no games with evictions if people have incidents where we deem severe enough, and most of the time we do. We take that very serious because the properties are inspected the same way the backgrounds are expected, so we take it all very serious. Benefits to Raymore. It's an approximately, right now we have modeled, it's about a $7.58 million investment into Raymore. About 150 jobs during construction. There'll be 2 permanent jobs. And that part-time job I should have updated, but I updated this before our West Central talks. That may be one full-time job because West Central would also not only be involved in the ownership we're proposing, but also providing the services. And to be right across the street, these residents will have, tremendous access and tremendous contact to who is providing those services. New property taxes, new utility revenues, new sales tax. We're not asking for any type of abatement or anything of that nature. And just a chance for residents 55 and up to age in place. We see a lot of our residents in 55 and up communities. When they get there, a lot of times they stay and they age in place, and it's a very positive thing, especially with those services involved. an affordable rent structure. I mean, I have some of our preliminary rents here, but very, very affordable in Cass County. And the more competitive we make those rents to Missouri, to MHDC, again, they've kind of made that a more of a point scoring. So the more affordable you make it, the better, the more competitive your application is. So we're trying to do that as well. So hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I know your time is valuable, but I'm free to answer any questions. And the reason for this is to tell you guys that we're still trying, but also, you know, meetings down the road, try to get that resolution of support again to show in our application that shows the agency that, you know, we've got that strong community support and municipality support. So I'm free to take any questions.
Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. Two questions, one for you, sir, and one for staff. The process with Missouri, obviously you've been through that a number of times. What's the timeline? When would you expect to hear back from something from the Missouri as to whether or not you've...
How much should I say publicly? They've not put, the process usually starts with MHDC putting out a draft QAP, and that's the guidelines we have to follow every single year, and they update it every single year. They've not gotten that draft out, but if I was a betting man, I'd say they're gonna mimic last year, and September was our full application date last year, and then they let us know of approved projects in December. So.
Thank you. And that question for, I think, Mr. Catterat. So the location of the property is generally the area across from the Baptist Church and TB Hanna Station on the other side of 58 Highway. How far off of 58 is the property? Is it a block? Is it got 58 frontage? Where exactly is that?
Does not have direct frontage along 58 Highway. There's a row of a couple commercial buildings, actually a church is in one of the buildings at this point in time. So it's got a second tier. It was a second tier commercial property previously, got rezoned for the apartment community a few years back. So its access would be off of Adams Street.
Would the addition of this property require any type of engineering changes to the highway, such as a accel decel lane with the additional traffic that's being added from this project?
It would not, with the nature of the use that's there. It was felt that there weren't enough right turn movements to require a turn lane.
That's what I assumed, but I thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Mr. Dugawat.
Thank you, sir. I'm interested in just a little bit more information about your partnership with West Central.
Sure.
You mentioned involved in ownership, so kind of what are you working on with them?
Yeah, we reached out to them. Well, they were involved in the services side last year, and whenever we contacted them, maybe a month and a half ago, we started talking about how we can make our application even stronger. And in those talks, so I don't ramble on, we realized that they have a CHODO, and there's not many, very few organizations that do CHODO work, community housing development, organizational work, on the affordable side in Missouri. And once we started going down that path, we started talking about, we're willing to involve you in the ownership of this. We can let you guys property manage it, but those are all very preliminary, but we just wanted to, we didn't want to come into this with West Central saying, hey, we want to use your CHODO for points. Let's talk about how you can get involved more. You're right there. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but hopefully I had answered your question. We felt it was prudent to not say, we want to use your CHODO, you know, let's get the points and let's move on. We wanted to involve that CHODO, but also involve them in any which way that they would like to be involved in. And they've been very receptive, and they really like the aspect of, because they are involved in these types of projects. One would actually call them a competitor in some areas. They do develop their own stuff sometimes through MHDC. So they thought them being maybe a property manager was a positive because it's right there. So we're just exploring all that.
A follow-up to Mr. Dugawat's question. I had similar question, but what type of services would Western Central provide, and would you possibly have, you know, to keep those service provided in their current space? Would they put a satellite office in your facility?
Sure. We would have a community room where we've just done this in Springfield. We finished that Villas at Lark Point, I guess about 18 months ago. There is a space that we dedicate for those services, whether it be West Central organizes blood pressure checks, or a lot of 55 and up like to have tax help, or potluck dinners, or just community events that West Central can organize. But also that space, which I find really positive, is sometimes residents want to be a little more private, and so they'll contact West Central saying, I'm looking for this in the community, but I'm either new here or this is all new to me. And so they have a private space to contact them and to talk with them about what's available, rather than it being in an open forum type situation.
Understood.
So yeah, blood pressure checks and community gardens, and they put residents in touch with what you guys have going on in the community. It's a really good middle ground. You know what I mean?
Understood.
So.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Berenson. I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question about rent pricing. I know you may not have that nailed down exactly, but do you have a range?
Sure.
Maybe per square foot where you think the rents are going to be for this,
Yeah,
for
let
this
me pull
location?
that up. They're going to mimic a lot like last year. We are going to try to make them a little more competitive from what I was discussing earlier. We're attempting to reach, where we are going to reach 30% AMI of Cass County, of that area median income, all the way to 80%. So our 30% one bedroom is what we have modeled right now, about $390 a unit. The two bedrooms would be about $460. If you take that all the way to the 80% AMI of Cass County, the one bedroom would be $800, two bedroom $900. And then we are hitting 50% and 60%, which will be $580 to $775. So we really try to hit all those tiers of Cass County, because not everybody, obviously, makes that same income. There might be, our market study's going on right now, but there might be more 60% qualifiers in the area, but there's still going to be 30% qualifiers.
Are these readjusted annually, or?
No, MHDC really holds us to these. We're not allowed to. Next year we raise them $100, every unit. We're held to these for quite a while, and for us to raise rents, we have to go through the process of talking to the agency and substantiating why we need to raise the rents, which we rarely ever do. I think in Fulton, Missouri, Callaway Village 1, I think, was awarded 2001. I still think it has the same rents. So, no, raising rents is, if that was your concern, it won't be an issue.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Circle.
Good evening, Mr. Beckler. Yeah, we talked before.
Sure.
Now, I'm very aware of Lakewood, very aware of Briar. I dealt many years over there with your people in the office. My sister lived there in Lakewood for years, and they went to family, and they had some issues. They built a new building, the three-story, the brick building. Obviously, in these pictures, it's not going to be the same concept
Right.
as that over in Belton.
Right.
It's going to be a different pattern from what I've seen tonight.
Right.
Now, I noticed when I was over there dealing with them and dealing with West Central, year in and year out over there, for many years, there was always a lot of problems with your office managers.
Okay.
You had your major office manager, you had a couple assistants, and then we tried to get one in Briarwood. They wouldn't last long. A lot of times you'd go there for the office, and the office is always closed. You had to go next door to Terrace, and if they were not or busy or gone, you couldn't talk to nobody. They had that problem. It was a consistent problem I had to deal with when my sister was there. And the security, they had the codes for the building was always broke. People were getting in they shouldn't have. It become a lot of people were living there 55 plus, but they were all basically retired low income, they had some issue, but their family members would come in with the broken, and they would have problems because other people were there, staying with grandma, grandpa, and other problems we had there. And I'd dealt with that many times. So that's why I asked you originally, how is this going to compare to there over across the highway when you build these, where it's going to be secure, and the people coming in are going to be the people who are there. It's not going to become more cars, more people living there like it did at Briarwood.
Right.
Because no matter what I did and what we worked with your office staff, which are very good, there's only things they can do.
Right.
And then they'd have to go up to upper management on things, and they would tell me, went to upper management, they said, just don't worry about it. You know, and they would kind of give them a brush off. And I had to deal with upper management a couple of times and got the brush off. I wasn't happy with that. That's why I brought that up.
Sure.
So with all my personal dealings for my sister for about 7 years over there, Lakewood first and then the Briar, I noticed these concepts, these things that were not working well. And I don't want, I'd be a little negative if it's going to come over here if we have the same problem.
Sure.
Where we don't have the staffing, you don't have the managers, you don't have the people on call, like you said, the maintenance guy. The other maintenance guy was walking around, and then he decided he'd be the policing guy. And then he would do stuff which he shouldn't be doing, and got in a lot of trouble. So hopefully, when you talk about this is a whole different concept of how you're going to rate your people, your employees, and your staffing. Because it didn't do a good job over there for 7 years on both of those. That's letting you know.
Okay.
So that's why I brought that originally when you spoke. That makes
sure.
me a little nervous. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can just speak to that briefly. I mean, we'll take that. I can't speak to what was going on. You know, I've been with the group for 5 years, but what I can say is that I'll move that on up the chain and make that aware to them. And also, I want to mention our West Central partnership is not finalized by any means, but should it get to that point, I think having that office right there will be
Well, West
might
Central,
alleviate some of that.
West Central's good.
Yeah.
West Central's got a lot of great people, and they really are very strict on what they do and how they proceed with stuff.
Okay.
So West Central is a good addition. That's nice.
Yeah.
'Cause they don't really pull a lot of punches. They don't have a lot of gray areas. It's ABC for them.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
So appreciate your comments.
Any further questions? Well, Mr. Beckler, thank you.
Thank you all.
And good luck on the process.
Yeah, tell the mayor sorry I missed them.
Yes, we certainly will.
This item will be followed up with a resolution for council consideration at next Monday's meeting.
Next Monday. Excellent. Thank you, sir. I did have a comment. Thank you, Mr. Beckley.
Yeah, thank you.
Just for either Mr. Frew or Mr. Staff, at some point, with all the growth that's going on in this portion of the town, I know we've had several traffic studies and calming studies. At what point will we probably see something to kind of give us some sense of what the pedestrian access, getting them to the new amenities across the street, at TB Hannon and other things like that? When will we start to see something that kind of gives us an idea how to get people from the north to the south side of 58?
I anticipate we are going to be proposing a study to the council for all of 58, because the studies that you're going to be seeing here in July are about traffic access and traffic patterns. As the council knows, it has long been an issue with staff on getting people across 58 in a pedestrian friendly manner. That goes for the entirety of 58, and each section is a little bit different, and I'll be very careful here, Mr. Icky. Mr. Icky has kind of been on the leading edge of a proposal for this particular area of development as a whole picture. When we get into the S-curve of 58 Highway, we're going to be bringing that to you more than likely in the fall with some pretty progressive and aggressive ideas.
I wouldn't think nothing less. Thank you. I appreciate it. Seeing no more questions on item A, we can move on to item B.
I will turn this over to Mr. Icky.
Thank you, sir. The conversation tonight with the council really is twofold. One, we are coming up on our second-year anniversary with our relationship with Constable Sanitation, which provides our citywide trash, recycling, and yard waste. And so there's really two parts to this conversation. The first is this is an ideal opportunity to kind of look back at the last year and present to the council some of the successes and talk about some of the highlights that, at least from a staff perspective, we have seen. In speaking with George just before the meeting tonight, and it was refreshing to just have a candid conversation. And even with all of the challenges of COVID and the different hurdles that it presented to just about every single organization, I knew with confidence that Constable Sanitation had trucks in town every single day, continuing to provide quality service to our residents. And while George was able to run a tight ship, we know he too met with some challenges, just as the city did, and other employers, when it came to ensuring you had adequate staffing, ensuring equipment was running, all while this global pandemic was, running its course. And so I think it's worth mentioning as we go through the past, or as we looked at the past year, as businesses were shutting down, schools were shutting down in the late part, or in 2020, and then through the summer, everyone really turned to home remodeling projects or yard work projects, all these things that affected the trash stream and that George Constable and his staff had to deal with on a daily basis. At one point, he made the comment to me in the middle of the year, typically you have 1 or 2 weeks of Christmas level trash coming from the community that has to go to the landfill. In 2020, we had nearly 2/3 of the year was that Christmas level trash stream, which is really impressive because we continue to see through the citizen survey, we saw a 20% increase in the level of satisfaction when we conducted the ETC survey. And one thing that we also, as we dove a little deeper into the data, while we saw that 86% of our residents were either satisfied or very satisfied, we're able to dissect the data a little bit more. And there's a kind of a thinking when it comes to essential services like trash, where you may not necessarily be satisfied or very satisfied, but if your trash is getting picked up every day and it's working the way it should, you may end up putting down that you're simply neutral. The trash is getting picked up like it should, so you may not give it the A+ that we know, at least from a staff side. And so if we factor in those neutral responses we received from the ETC survey, we see that satisfaction level jump to 96% on the entirety of the service. I know George behind me is probably grimacing a little because he'd like to see it be 100, but I figure that extra 10% when we saw our citizen satisfaction survey, and that is, for us, that is the methodology behind that survey is really complete. I think gives us a good picture of what our residents think of the trash service. As we're going forward, in the second half of this conversation, as part of the contract, we will begin, the anniversary offers us an opportunity to revisit the contract, which council had initially approved on July 15, 2 years ago. Typically, what council has done in the past is the contracts were with the 2 previous trash haulers. They had been approved with an effective date of January 1. And so the rates and the service itself was rolled into our budget presentation. And so the provider presented the rate changes as part of the budget process. It went before council, wrapped with the water rates and the other service fees that the city would provide, and then would be approved through the budget process. But because we cut the contract of the previous provider a little short, and George was able to step in with the mid-year, the July 15th start date, we really need to advance, and as this contract comes up for renewal, is a good opportunity for us to look at the current rate for the trash service. After the completion of the first year, Constable Sanitation took no action on a rate change. And so for 2 years, our residents have enjoyed trash service at the exact same rate that we initiated the contract with Constable Sanitation. Within the contract, there is a metric for determining what, if any, rate change the contractor is allowed to make. And that is tied directly to the consumer price index for garbage and trash services. And so the number that is associated with a rate change isn't a number that is made up out of thin air. This is tied directly to the CPI that is associated with fuel costs, labor costs, and maintenance costs as a percentage. And so when applied to our current rate, and our current trash collection rate just for trash is $12.95. Moving forward with the renewal of the contract on July 15th, we would see a 60-cent increase, meaning that the adjusted trash collection rate would be $13.55. And I know there are a couple different fees also, there are a couple different items that are associated with our overall trash collection. That number is just associated for the trash collection. They're offering or presenting no change to recycling, no change to the one free bulky item per month, and no change to the annual free pickup of yard waste that residents currently enjoy. And so if a resident currently had just the trash service, no recycling, but just the trash service, that rate would be the $13.55 plus the $1.50 cart fee that is associated to be the change to $15.05 would be the new rate if you were just a trash-only resident. If you receive trash and recycling as part of your service, the trash with the associated increase plus the recycling fee of $5.20 plus the cart fee would mean monthly a resident would be paying $20.25 for trash and recycling service. Again, no change to the fee on recycling, no change to the free bulky item, and no change to the free yard waste. We've invited both George and Shannon this evening if you have any questions, but I wanted to present just a quick highlight of the year, the service that has been provided, but then also kind of introduce council to this rate change that we'll be presenting to council in a regular session as part of our adjustment to the fee or the schedule fee going forward. I'm happy to take any questions, but also would like to open it up. George, if you had anything you wanted to present or.
Well, I might as well step up here since I'm here. Thank you, Mike, for going over that presentation. And, you know, I feel like that Jim, Mr. Fearborn here, when we first started this contract, really wanted our company because I have boots on the ground. So feel free to ask me any questions relating to Corona, what trash trends, even a conversation I need to have with Mr. Eckey is currently our cart prices from our suppliers have went up $10 per cart. So he might want to get in contact if you have any future developments that are going to need additional carts, maybe to plan that in the budget as well. But I'm available. I'll just stay up here.
Mr. Barber.
Thank you. I don't really have any questions. I just have a comment. First of all, I'd like to apologize for my family for 2020, what we put in the trash, because I know my wife went through everything, and it was more than our normal for sure, even more than our Christmas. But I just did the calculation. The raise with the cart rate and your fee works out to $3.47 a week. What you come up with, Mr. Eckey, and that's a hell of a deal. I mean, for you to come to my house and pick my garbage up for $3.47 a week, I think that's, especially you guys have been doing a great job. So really appreciate it, and that's still, can't even get a cup of coffee anymore for that. So thank you.
And that includes yard waste?
No, that's just trash.
But the rate we pay includes the yard waste and with all the rain we've had this past months and the grass clippings I've had to put out. You've definitely picked up a few bags.
Yes.
So,
We're typically pretty good as long as it doesn't rain every day.
Yeah.
I enjoy this weather.
Yes.
Keep the drought going.
Exactly. Mr. Holman. I got you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Constable, I wanted to say, if there was a one constant during the coronavirus, it was your service. And not only have you provided, in my opinion, in talking with constituents, above-board trash service, but the attitude of your people has been very, very friendly and warm. I predicted early on that once we got somebody that was going to do a really good job for us, trash service is kind of like streets and plowing and police service. You only hear the negative side of things when something goes wrong. And I said, the problems we had in the past are going to be a distant memory. And I ran into two people a couple weeks ago, one of which had complained about our previous provider. And I said, yeah, it's been a while since we talked. He goes, when did we last talk? I said, during the trash crisis. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's fixed. Who was our old provider? Exactly. So it goes to show what kind of service you provide, what kind of company you run, and what kind of people you have doing the work. And it's also ironic, today was the pickup day for my trash, and I had 2 carts out front, and when they came by, they picked up one and missed the other one, and he went down into the cul-de-sac, and so I went down to talk to him. I was kind of a little leery on how he might take my, as soon as he saw me, he goes, "First house on the right." And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I forgot to pick up the second one, didn't I?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I'll be back to get it." He backed up and beat me back to pick up that trash before I got there. So exceptional customer service. The citizens of Raymore, I think, are very, very satisfied. I know I am, and we're glad to have you here. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Circle?
Kind of come off that. I've talked to a lot of people, the last couple of years, especially last year, about trash. And I've got no negatives. I've got all positives. You guys do a great job. You come through our neighborhood. I saw my lady up on a corner the other day. She put it out. It's supposed to be 7 a.m. She come out late. She'd already come through because there's a time you usually come through the neighborhood. So I think she just, next day you guys came back and you picked it up. She might have called, but it doesn't matter to you guys. You pick it up. 10, 15 bags of grass. You guys never complain. Your people are there every day doing their job in the areas they're supposed to be. I've never had a problem. And I've got nothing negative. I've talked to lots and lots of people. How's your trash service? Every time I get around to it, we love it. We love it. It's so great. So I just want to let you know that you guys are doing a fantastic job. And for this small increase, is nothing really in today's cost of things, with things going up. It's understandable. 2 years on a rate, we're going to year 3. I see no problem with that. It's still, to me, it's the best charge you get for the company we have, for the services you give, especially with the yard waste and everything else. You guys do a phenomenal job, and you never complain. Your drivers, hey, how you guys doing? They're very nice. They're very cordial. They're very respectful. Thank you.
Mr. Degwan?
Thank you, sir. I would agree with everything everyone has said. I hear lots of positives, very reliable, great bang for your buck. You guys are doing a great job. But I know you're kind of like me. If you take the time to come to the meeting, you want to hear all the great stuff, but tell me one thing I can do better. Like, what can we do to make it even better? And one of our previous providers was excellent on those windy days when your recycling's blowing down the road, at picking up the things that blow away. And if I've heard a complaint from anybody in my neighborhood, it's that they come and they dump the trash, which is doing your job, and everybody understands that. But like, the above and beyond would be if on those windy days they'd hop out and pick up the stuff that's blown, if they've got time. And again, like I said, it's above and beyond, but that's the one thing that I've heard people say could make it just perfect.
Is this more around Silver Lake or like the Creekmore? Is this wind coming off the lakes tend to be more of an issue, or is it?
Ward 4, so we're out on that end of town.
Okay. Yeah, Ward Place, and trying to think of that gated community over there too. They kind of have the Victorian style houses. Or
Chateau Place.
Oh, Chateau Place, yeah, way out there. Moon Valley, East Estates, that area too, closer, like Lucy Webb and Jay, that area.
yeah, I know what truck it is.
But you guys are doing a great job. Like I said, above and beyond would be that's the only complaint I've heard from people.
I want to hit that other 4%.
I know you do. That's why I shared. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barber?
Yeah, I just got a comment on that, comment from Mr. Galquad, but Mr. Constable, I know you're a good communicator, and you guys have done a real good job about educating our residents on recycling and all that stuff. Maybe in that regard that you put something out about, if stuff's in a bag and not loose in a trash can, there's less likely for it, because I've watched them go up and go in the trash truck, and if it's loose in there, the wind can catch it and kind of blow out, and there's not hardly much you can do about that on those real windy days. But maybe a piece, you know your business better than I do, but maybe something to talk about, try to keep stuff in a bag, or something where it can't blow out of the trash can.
Yeah, clean practices always help. We hate to do the ones on a windy day with the packing peanuts. They're gone.
We're also discussed partnering with one of our cart manufacturers. Clips are becoming more common for carts, where they'll still dump even if the side load picks it up. So that is becoming a bigger thing, and something that we would be interested in letting residents contact us. And, hey, yep, it's easy enough to
Mr. Holman?
I wanted to add to my comment, in addition to the great service, you've been a great community partner. I will not forget, and nor will anyone in this room forget, your group had more active participation in our fundraiser dinner down here for the park, and your people donated a lot of money, and we're getting real close on that. And that is not unnoticed, sir, not unnoticed whatsoever. Thank you.
Yeah, and Corona kind of shut all that down. And, it feels like it's been a year since I've stood up here, and a lot of that was due to the Corona pandemic.
Well, George, again, I'm sorry, Mr. Circle?
Just to listen, we have another one, we definitely will call you. You said we want it, we will call you.
I'll plan on it. I'll get a check ready.
Mr. Constable was actually responsible for me getting a pie in the face, so I want to thank the council for...
We're definitely calling you, putting that on the agenda. Excellent. Well, Mr. Constable, again, thank you. Obviously, speaking on behalf of the council and the council speaking on behalf of the residents, thank you for the service you provided to the community. And we look forward to you continuing that going forward in the coming months and years, depending on how things go. So, again, thank you. Thank you both. So, there be no more questions or comments on that agenda item. We'll move on to agenda item C, Senate Bill 153.
I just reminded Mr. Icky that all of his recommended price increases in his career will probably not go this easy.
Yes.
So, would like to talk to the council a little bit about the Missouri legislation passage of Senate Bill 153, commonly known as the Wayfair Act. Missouri and Florida were the last two in the United States to actually pass this piece of legislation. While the summary report from MML, if you had the opportunity to look at their intro to it, Mr. Sheets spent a great deal of time thanking the senators for the passage of this. An editorial note, I would not have been thanking anyone for the passage of this. It did very little for us relative to the use tax, and it took away a lot of items that are currently in place and tools for the city. So I'm just going to kind of go through and outline what this actually means for us with the council's indulgence. From the standpoint, there were many sections of this bill. It became very close to an omnibus type bill with different things that it touched on. First, what it actually did with the use tax, of course, we were able and made an attempt to put the use tax onto the ballot, which was unfortunately defeated. What the bill actually does is it takes, you will remember that there is a legislative mandate for the wording of the use tax ballot language that we have to use. That is still in place, and that language is actually still in place, but they have added to it, and this is, I'm kind of titling all these good, neutral, and bad. The good is they have added to the end of that ballot language the following wording, and it's mandatory. Approval of this question will eliminate the disparity in tax rates collected by local and out-of-state sellers by imposing the same rate on all sellers. Remember, that was one of our approaches to the Chamber of Commerce, that this is actually good for our local vendors because it levels the playing field, if you will. So that language is now in the ballot. I was a little bit surprised that they actually did that, because you're not supposed to be able to advocate for an item within the ballot language, but I guess if the legislature says it's okay, unless somebody takes that to the Supreme Court. Neutral within the component that is the use tax, it requires the Department of Revenue to do mapping of the use of the use tax by political subdivisions who institute it. They were actually already doing this voluntarily for those municipalities and counties that pass the use tax, so that's why I say it's neutral. It's nice that it's actually now in writing. There were some people who, I won't say got fixated, but were really concerned about the fact that it wasn't the law for the DOR to map this and track this. So what was what was the stick, if you will, for them to do that. The stick is now in place. Neutral for us, in Raymore specifically, is the informational brochures that go out by the municipality. So when and if we put this onto the ballot, we'll get to that here in a minute, we cannot, it's kind of goofy wording, you cannot describe it as a new tax, nor can you describe it as not a new tax in your ballot language. You will remember that legislative wording, you'll remember that I was describing it in shorthand to people as an existing tax on items that it had not been applied to before. And we can actually use that wording. We just can't call it a new or not a new tax. Last item, which is actually bad, we cannot apply for the use tax and put it on the ballot until April of 2023. We are now in a moratorium period, which means we wait until then to get it on the ballot. I suspect that what we will see from MML is an attempt for everyone who does not currently have the use tax in place to try to put it on the ballot statewide. So tons of municipalities in April of 2023 will be putting this on. But we're in this holding pattern now where we desperately need people and we have no way to fund them until then. Second part of this, so that is a bad item relative to the use tax. Another section of the use tax Wayfair bill included adjustments to the video franchise tax fee that we currently collect. They are adjustments down. As you may remember, the state took over all of our franchise ability, so that was stripped from municipalities in 2007. So the state actually controls all of our utility franchises now. So beginning in our current franchise fee is 5% on video providers. Beginning in August of 2023, interestingly enough, the first month that we would be able to collect a use tax that was on the ballot and approved by the voters in April of 2023. So in August of 2023, it gets reduced from that 5% to 4.5%. In 2024, August of 2024, it gets reduced by another 0.5% to 4%. In 2025, it gets reduced to 3.5%. 2026 gets reduced to 3%, and finally in 2027 gets reduced to 2.5%, so halved. The fiscal impact to Raymore at our current collection rates over the next 10 years is $1,061,688 in the general fund of lost revenue. At the 2.5% rate, we will be losing $132,708 a year. Assuming we are able to pass the use tax, the council will remember that in the general fund, all of which was going to be used to fund police officers, we will be collecting, if it passes, $400,000 in the general fund. That will be offset by a $132,708 loss, which means that instead of being able to fund 5 police officers with the $400,000 plus some money from the capital improvement sales tax fund, we will only have the use of $267,000 in the general fund, which means 2 officer positions, unless I can figure out a way to supplementally fund some of the positions in enterprise or parks, or not fund those positions at all and bring on police officers. Establishes the second thing, and again, I titled the entire video franchise fee as bad. There are not sections that are neutral or good. It establishes a 16-member task force to look at the future of the video franchise tax as a whole, whether it will even exist. And that report will be due to the legislature on December 31st, 2023. 5 of the 16-member task force consist of municipal representation. They will pick a municipal representative from among the cities, and then Gateway and MML both have a representative to be assigned to it. So 5 of the 16 people who are on there will be ultimately favorable to the position of the municipalities on this. Everybody else will probably be looking at it from a very critical stance. I worry about this because we do considerable collections in franchise fees on utilities, and this door has now been cracked open pretty wide. This was actually proposed last year and made it out of subcommittee with a due pass recommendation, but they never got to it on the floor before the end of the session. It was actually proposed by our very own Senator Emery. Last year, this year, it was proposed by one of the senators from the St. Louis side, and has obviously passed within this bill that it had nothing to do with, but we see that all the time. The next area that was added to this bill was some changes to the rules associated with community improvement districts. Neutral for the city of Raymore. The plans have to be much more detailed to include sources and uses of funds within the presentations that are made to the city council on CIDs. We actually kind of insisted on that before anyway from our CIDs. Schedule E is always the schedule that's used, and I prefer that to be much more detailed. Another neutral item relative to the community improvements districts is that it limits the CID to 27 years. We had always insisted that our CIDs be 23 years anyway, so that's neutral for us. Third neutral item relative to this one, I call it neutral, we're just going to have to be very careful with it, is the CID board that is established for future years to run the CID. If the CID is being established in an area where there are no voting residents, for instance, if a CID was established for the area of Fox Ridge and 58, where there's the possibility, or perhaps not now, the possibility of a future TIF there, if they had an adjoining CID, there are no residents in that field. So if that is the case, which is usually the case with a CID, it has to have at least one member of the board who is an eligible voter, resident of the city, with no tangent investment interest in the CID. We just need to be real careful about that relative to who we're putting on the board. The boards are usually 5 or 6 people. We just need to make sure that one of those board members, who are usually all staff, are actually, that I'm on the board, basically, is what it might come down to. Last neutral position on this one, in addition to the annual report going to the state auditor's office, as is required in the current law, it now also has to go to the State Department of Economic Development so that they too can put it into one of those cardboard boxes and then check the box that they have received it from the city, which is literally all they do. Bad on this one, and it's really bad, all construction projects associated with the CID, whether done, they're never done by us unless it's something like when we put the stoplight in at Mott. That was actually our construction project associated with that one. All the construction projects are always done by the developer. So any of them, private or public related, have to be competitively and publicly bid out. That means, as an example, the CID that is the Culvers, to build the Culvers building would have required a public bid to go out. That's going to get interesting because a lot of times these developers use the same contractor over and over and over again for consistency. Hopefully that same contractor will get, obviously they're using them at some point in time. Most of the larger construction contracts like this are bid out anyway, but now they're going to have to follow all the rules of a competitively bid public bid, in that all of the background checks, all of the background checks on the vendors, all of those are going to have to now be done by a private contractor. It's going to delay completion of construction within the CIDs considerably. Especially, I mean, sometimes they're using them to build roads, sometimes they're using them to build their buildings, but all of them will be competitively bid. That concludes the community improvement district items. Yes, sir.
Quick question on that, while we're on the topic, and I may confuse this with the projects, but projects where the developer is going to be, they have the ability to also own construction company. So they're the investor, they're making in the development, building the culverts, but they also own the construction company
Yes.
that they want to use. So in this case, they would have to go out for a public bid. They can't outright choose to use their own construction company?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
It does not say that they can't. It remains to be seen, I'll be real careful there. It remains to be seen and interpreted whether they can award to lowest and best based on that criteria. If they own the construction company, can they say this is lowest and best? What's going to be the audit on that particular limitation?
Thank you. I asked that because I think I remember some presentation where we did have someone who had that capacity to do that, where they were the developer and they had the construction arm.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. Do these new rules apply to a TDD as well as a CID?
No, sir.
Okay.
Only the CIDs are called out.
Okay.
Give it time.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Barrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fieldborn, does this go into effect immediately, or is this a 2023?
If it goes as normal, it will be with the governor's signature on August 28th. Everything will go into effect, with the exception of those items that specifically call out the delay in favor of the municipalities until 2023.
Thank you.
We oftentimes, it's going to be a long summer. The developers are aware of this. If they're not aware, we're making them aware, and others are making them aware. If the governor's office and the legislature start to see a huge influx of developer proposals for this sort of an item, the governor could very well decide he's going to, occasionally he signs early, at these presentations and the press is there. He could sign it earlier than August 28th for sure. But we haven't heard anything to that effect. The last item that they touched on was tax increment financing. Again, I am giving this the overall rating of bad. We'll start with the, if you've ever seen the way the legislature writes municipality and county specific legislation, they always do it by population at the time that the legislation is passed. For a county with a population between 100,000 and 150,000 in total at this particular date, and they really trim it down sometimes to like 20 in the population so that it's only going to apply to a specific county. Talked a little earlier about Senator Emery and the video franchise fee. Tagged on to this particular piece of legislation by our own Senator Bratton, there are currently 3 very large counties on the St. Louis side, the size of Jefferson County, where you're talking 800,000 in population that are listed that way, that instead of the municipality having, whether you're a charter or not, instead of the municipality having the sovereign right to name its TIF commissioners, Senator Bratton proposed that Cass County be added along with those 3 counties on the St. Louis side, and he actually got that put into the legislation. So now you have St. Charles County and Jefferson County and Cass County added to the fact that any municipality within Cass County now is subject to the following appointment of their TIF commissioners. While currently we have an 11-member TIF commission, 6 members from the city, appointed by the city, 2 from the county, 2 from the school district, and 1 from other taxing jurisdictions, which is, they've always picked, the other taxing jurisdictions have always picked South Metro. That now changes. It is replaced with so basically our TIF commission has been abolished by the legislature. We will be reestablishing a new TIF commission. It will be a 12-member commission. 6 of the members will be appointed by the county's presiding commissioner with no vote of the county commission. He just does that on his own. 3 from the city, 2 from the school district, and 1 from other taxing jurisdictions. Dandy piece of legislation. We are going to be getting with the presiding, we are lucky. We have a very good presiding commissioner down at the county. My suggestion to him for ultimate approval by the city council, and of course, the county and the school district and the other taxing jurisdictions, you all have no say on. You only vote on the folks from the city. The school district board of education votes their people in, and again, the presiding commissioner will be naming 6. I will be getting with presiding commissioner Houston in the very near future to discuss that basically we keep the current 2 county commissioners on. We reduce our 6 to 3, but the 3 who are on for the city just are now named as county commissioners, or county representatives to the commission. And then of course the school district and the 1 other taxing district remain the same, but I'm going to suggest to Mr. Houston that there just be some shuffling and that he then would be responsible for naming that 12th commissioner, which is the 6th position from the county. Hopefully he would be naming perhaps even himself to that. We are very lucky that we have a very reasonable presiding commissioner. I can think of 1 or 2 names where this could get us into a lot of trouble. Historically, we believe that the reason for this particular request to add to the legislation is several years ago, Harrisonville had a very bad TIF. And the mayor for Harrisonville after that TIF, who is very, very good friends with Senator Bratton, has been in his ear about TIF commissions ever since. And so I think that this is a carryover from that. The mayor wrote to Senator Bratton expressing our dismay, his dismay specifically about this particular development. I would say that the response was very, very weak to the mayor's email. Any questions on that particular item until we get to the really good stuff in TIF?
Mr. Holman.
Thank you, sir. The last provision that you talked about at length, did they label that the Tom Pendergast provision? I'm just curious if it had a name. It would seem to be very apropos based on what they did.
It's very interesting that these 3 huge counties and then us.
Yeah, it only dates back about 100 years. I see the historical context. Thank you, sir.
Size of county residents, Cass County is about 100,000.
Yes, sir.
And those counties that we are now paired with,
800,000 over $1 million, sir.
800,000 over $1 million. So we are held to the same. So to fix a problem at the 800,000 and up level, They brought in the 100,000 resident community. Okay. So, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Another concerning issue with tax increment financing that is in this particular piece of legislation involves what you have all heard us respond to as greenfield. Specifically, that is for us here, some of our targeted areas. Greenfield is considered the pork chop, as you've heard me refer to it. Greenfield would be the TIF we're going to be proposing, the city initiated TIF will be proposing at 58 Highway in Fox Ridge. Greenfield TIF is now limited to areas that have, one, been in the city for 10 years and been zoned commercial for 10 years. Both of those have to be in effect. What is the impact of this on Raymore? Obviously, both of the areas I just now mentioned have been in the city for 10 years and have been zoned commercial for the same amount of time. Our problem is annexation down to 291 and 58. So the minute that those areas are annexed in, we can rezone them immediately to commercial, but then we have to wait for 10 years. So the earliest you would see commercial in any of those areas would be 2032 relative to this particular piece of legislation. Really hurts growth and annexation because a lot of cities are going to be in that same boat. Growth cities where if you're annexed, and one of the specific reasons we want to go down 58 is to control what happens commercially to the intersection of 291 and 58. That's on pause for 10 years after we pass. Next piece of legislation associated with this was the definition of blight. It limits TIF funds for private infrastructure, which we have used TIF funds for private. The specific one on that I would bring to the council's attention was Sam's Club. There was private infrastructure associated with that parking lot and building, vertical, if you will. So it limits the use of TIF funds for private unless a blight finding is found. The definition of blight has been reduced within this act to remove highest and best use can no longer be, if it's not meeting highest and best use, it can no longer be considered blighted. And if the platting or the street network is considered to be inadequate, both of those have been removed from consideration. This eliminates the use of TIF for the pork chop because the pork chop's blight study would have been, it is not being utilized to its highest and best use. So TIF is off the table for any sort of incentive being offered down there. We're working on alternatives as we speak. There are always alternatives. I have a personal concern that this could, so when we proposed the city-initiated TIF for 58 Highway in Fox Ridge, the city center TIF, it is going to include, it was originally going to include south side of 58, the Dean property, including the future Hy-Vee, north side of 58, Willow Wind, and the Orscheln's building. Orscheln's building has been removed from that. We will still be able to, within the entire TIF area, claim blight because Willow Wind is blighted. We will no longer be able to use that Willow Wind is not succeeding to its highest and best use, nor will we be able to use that for the greenfield. My concern is that there is another piece of legislation associated with this. All TIF plans and specifically called out all blight studies now have to go to an independent third party to review the entire TIF plan with a particular eye to the blight study. It concerns me that the north and south sides of 58 are not homogeneous. Obviously, we've got blighted development on one side and a greenfield on the other. It still says we can use it for the whole area. I have concerns that when it goes to an independent third party, they may suggest that we ask the legislature for an interpretation of this, which then puts the TIF plan on hold, or any development within the TIF plan on hold. Just a worry I have. It's not called out, but it wouldn't surprise me with the direction all of this is going. Last couple of items, which I'll classify as neutral, but they are limiting. No projects in floodplains. We never would propose a project for a floodplain anyway. And it allows for emergency service agencies to completely remove themselves at any point from the TIF, from their contribution to the TIF. The concern I have with that one is you're running along with a specific revenue pattern and reimbursement that's been agreed to on the TIF. How does that get made? And of course, the only one that we would have to worry about is South Metro. But we're 6 years into a TIF. Well, what happens to the revenue shortfall that is now associated with them opting out of the particular TIF plan? Does the city have to make that up? What happens? Or is there going to be a shortage on the bonds associated with it? Is it going to be a pay-as-you-go where all of a sudden the developer's now a little bit upset? All of these are going to make developers extremely skittish. We've already seen that in one who was presenting to us just last week and didn't actually know about this. So we outlined it to them and the meeting came to an abrupt end. That concludes staff report on this item, sir.
I don't know if I want to even ask. But are there any questions on this particular agenda item or comments? I will offer that this does seem to hamper, it does hamper the significant strides we've made in the community to grow our community strategically in different areas, whether it be commercial or residential. And even with the long-range plans and things that, I'm certain that we don't know about that staff is working on. Just looking at what you were speaking to earlier regarding the franchise fees and the reduction in that over the years, given how right now you're already working on the budget for next year and you're probably already having to plan in, reducing incrementally, next year, planning for it so it's not a huge impact in 10 years, should this impact. So this is amazing how just using the 100,000 residents in Cass County, comparing it, including us in with the 1 million plus other counties, how that's greatly impacting us in trying to fix a problem somewhere else and lumping everybody in with that, just as an imbalance in trying to get things done. So definitely a challenge for us up here and more so for you out there in how we devise a plan to navigate these new waters. I think, Mr. Holman, you may have had a...
I'll hold on to it.
All righty, thank you, sir.
The two items from the piece of legislation that I didn't bother to bring up, but it does show the sweeping nature of it, is it changes the entire taxing structure for private airplanes. And it may come to hit some of us. It changes the income tax rates on Missouri residents, those who were specifically impacted in their jobs by COVID. But both of those items got pushed into this one, which is just kind of odd.
So is it in our best interest to install a runway?
It seems like a lot of favors were done with this particular piece of legislation.
To offset losses elsewhere, we can gain it. Sorry. If there's no more comment or questions on this agenda item, believe we'll move on to the next agenda item, item D, U.S. Census.
Thank you, and I will have Mr. Carteret begin on this particular item, and then I'll be following up.
Thank you, sir. As we all know, Raymore is growing, which is a good thing. And what it does is lead staff to keep a very close eye on the official U.S. Census counts, because that's very important. Mr. Fierborn will get into the details of that when I'm done with a few numbers here. But we are staying very close, we being city staff, stay in very close contact with the Census Bureau. The pandemic has affected the official release of the April 1st, 2020 census numbers. We should have already had those numbers, in fact, but it has delayed. The Bureau, currently, they're indicating that the initial release of data to the communities would be August 16th, but that will be in a format that's very hard to for communities to digest. The format that they utilize, they have special software for, if you would, decoding their analysis, their data. They'll have all of that available by September 30th. I say by, it will be September 30th. They don't release their data early. We have learned that over many, many years. So we expect to have those full numbers released to us for use by September 30th. One note you may have seen in the weekly report last week, where the Census Bureau has stayed on schedule for releasing their population estimates. So at the end of May of each year, they release estimates for communities based on July 1st of the previous year. So about a week ago, they released the information for July 1st of 2020, which is ironically after the April 1st date, but they're only estimates, and a very basic math is how they do their estimates. They start off with the 2010 census, and then they just count building permits and place a value per household. Usually for Cass County, it's 2.64 residents per household. But they just use the raw data of permits, and so based upon from July 1st of 2019 to July 1st of 2020, we issued about 136 permits, and that's exactly the numbers that they came up with. So our official population that I put out was 22,532. So we're growing. We're still growing faster than the other communities in Cass County. Interestingly, if we used August 1st data, the lofts permits were issued in July. If we used an August 1st date, we would have been, I don't know that we would have surpassed Belton. We would have been neck and neck based on permit numbers with their population. They're growing, but not, they're issuing a few permits, but not like Raymore is. So we're very anxious with the April 1st official data. That's what they take into account: births, deaths, and migration. All things we think are advantageous for our community. With our residents, we think we're going to stand very strong. It's been my contention all along that although the permit data is strong, I believe the numbers will be stronger than what even the population estimates have been. So again, we keep a very close eye on that. I monitor their site often. We talk with the Census Bureau officials in Kansas City often. But hopefully we'll have that data by September 30th, and then we can start doing the work that we do as staff with those numbers. And I believe that's what Mr. Fierborn will get into now. So available for any questions if you have on the dates.
I had a question on just collection of the data. What was our ultimate percentage of residents who responded?
The official number was just under 90% that we had participation rate, which is outstanding. And of course, they do follow-up work after that. That was our official, the ability for the city and residents to officially submit the information. But of course, they then send out their canvassers to fill in that last 10%. So it's very strong.
Mr. Holman. Mr. Holman, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. So with a little bit of a delay of the official numbers, one of the next things that comes along with us that's related to that is redistricting of the city with the growth that we've had. When's that going to hit? I know we were originally talking September based on when that stuff has hit us historically, but now it's going to be a little delayed. So do we have a new timeline for?
And that's That's my portion of this presentation, sir, so what a
Okay.
great segue. It will have the following two impacts. If we would have had the numbers by now, the state would have had the numbers by now, and the state would have been changing all of those revenue sources that we have, and I'll bring up two specific ones, the vehicle sales tax and the gasoline sales tax. Those are calculated on a city compared to other cities in the state calculation. As we grow and we get bigger proportionally than cities here, then the revenue sources associated with that go up for the next 10-year period. Last time we saw a significant increase in those revenue sources. It will be even more so now. Those collections would have begun on, the change would have begun on July 1. Now we anticipate the change will probably not be until maybe as late as January 1. So kind of doing the estimates, but it will impact, while I had a known 10 years ago and in the interim for what those numbers were going to be at budget time, I'm not going to know that this time. So those will be best calculation estimates for the council, but we'll keep them conservatively low. The second item is what you brought up, sir. We will have 10 weeks before candidate filing to redistrict and get two readings in front of the council of the recommended redistricting ward boundary lines. Because obviously mid-December, things will open up for council filing and mayoral filing, and we will have just that long from September 30th. We'll have October, November, and half of December to get all of that wrapped up. Not insurmountable, but we'll all have to be very much on task, especially at the staff level. Lots of maps. Can't wait. So COVID has been nothing but inconvenient.
Yes, Mr. Burke.
Thank you. Mr.
Yes.
I know what your title is tonight. Temporary Mayor Pro Tem. Anyway, presiding officer, thank you. We don't probably have any idea, based on the different wards, where trends in the last 10 years have put more houses in one ward that haven't been represented, as opposed to a different ward that's, like my ward's pretty well stuck as far as growth. There's not a lot of places to grow, whereas some of the other wards have a lot of empty space. Do we have any ideas whether we think some wards will grow geographically and others will shrink, or?
I wouldn't say grow or shrink, because there's a lot involved with that.
Right.
We all know our most significant development over the last 10 years has been Creekmore. But we've seen other locations. Council is going to be hearing from some pretty hefty ones. Obviously, everybody who will be living in the lofts will be a voter, and we'll have to take what's going to happen in those situations that are givens, that are knowns, not speculative, but they're knowns because they're building them. We're going to have to take that into consideration, which will impact other wards. So there's a lot that will go into that stew before it's cooked complete.
Do we have, I don't know how many we have within our city, communities that are split between wards? And would this possibly come into play now?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I believe we really only have one, if you would, neighborhood community that's split. When you get over north of the post office, the Cumberland Hills, when you the perimeter streets, Sierra and Foxwood. If you're on the outside of the streets, you're in Ward 4. If you're on the inside of the area, you're in Ward 3. I think that's the only neighborhood that's split that I can recall.
And staff recommendation at the time, that particular adjustment was done after staff recommendations 10 years ago. We probably wouldn't be making that same sort of a recommendation because just like annexation, the drawing of ward boundaries is supposed to be compact and contiguous. They're supposed to be defined to avoid that kind of a question.
Okay.
So what you would see from staff's first pass is whole neighborhoods included.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I see you thinking, Mr. Holman. If there are no more questions on this agenda item, I believe we're moving on to the next agenda item E, candidate questions.
Thank you, sir. I did pass out what I had emailed to the council saying that we would have discussion on it tonight. It has been pointed out to me that the third question from the bottom, I had used the previous wording, which is a 2-year cycle, when actually next April, whoever would be coming in Ward 1 seat would actually be going up for election for a 1-year cycle. It will be one of those unusual items where Councilmember Townsend, if he chooses to run again, would be going for a 2-year. There would be a second item on the ballot for a 1-year. But if the council has any questions they'd like added to this, if you don't, these would be in front of you with blank pages for you to write on afterwards.
Mr. Abdullah.
Just one comment. I remember from last time when we did these questions, the question about if you're not appointed, would you be available to serve on a board, followed by the question about if you're appointed, do you plan to run for the office, was just very uncomfortable because the answers were yes, 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 and then back down the line, yes, yes, yes. You know, like that was just, those questions were just a little uncomfortable and weird. So either combine them, you know, would you be interested in which one of these boards and or running for office, talk a little bit about that, or, I mean, I felt like just from that past experience, these two questions were kind of odd in that format. And then my second comment, I had suggested before a question about teamwork, which the one about the thorny topic kind of alludes to that. And then finally, I think it would be interesting at the end to just give them 3 minutes for any final thoughts, things that maybe they wanted to share that they didn't get to. I've been in interviews like that, you know, and so you've talked through all their questions, but there was this one thing you wanted to be able to say, and to give them that opportunity. And additionally, that kind of gives you a chance to connect it to our council member communication at the end of our meetings. You know, at the end of our meetings, we have this opportunity to talk to anything that happened in the meeting. So here's your chance. Do you have any final thoughts? Things that you would like to share that you didn't get to tonight. So that would be a suggestion.
And I had similar comments as well to Ms. Abdelgawad, and I had kind of taken some notes from this, having sat through these exact questions in 2017, so I know full well what you're speaking about. And I had kind of organized these, if you will, in kind of a natural progression. And if you wanted to jot them down, just to kind of hear my thoughts as far as a number in order of question, just going down the list. So that would, the first question would be number 3. The second would be number 4. The next third, starting with after discussion, would be number 6, followed by number 5, 7. If you are not applicable, would be number 9. If appointed, 8. 2, and then 1. And I think, to Ms. Abdelgawad's point, 9 and 8 kind of blend together, but that's, to me, seems like it's a natural progression to get through the questions, what would spark follow-on comment and question by council members. And then I also added the part about closing comments at the end, just to kind of help close that loop before we go into our debate. Mr. Barber.
Yeah, thank you. We will get the form that they fill out, correct, when they ask to be on the council, correct?
That is correct, sir.
So that's, to me, like an introduction. So maybe instead of having a 3-minute introduction, You know, they might just say who they are and use that as and use that 3 minutes or whatever for a closing statement. I think probably that's maybe more important after they get the feel of the interview than the introduction. What do you think?
Mr. Burke.
I'm wondering, we normally will post their written responses and have them as part of the packet. So that part will be information that the public will already have if they want it. Because I see what you're saying, but I don't want the public to miss out on the ability to read what the written answers were. And those probably would be posted up as part of our packet. Would that be correct?
I believe so, sir.
Okay.
So we post these questions to them and they respond?
No, sir. They don't see these questions until the mayor asks them or the presiding officer, until you ask them on.
Correct, yes.
I mean,
So that was, okay.
and the way we have done it in the past is there is a single questioner, and that is the presiding officer, sir.
And that brings the point as far as the conduct of the evening. What's most appropriate? So when the presiding officer asks the question of the three candidates, give them an opportunity to respond each for 3 minutes. I was thinking it's appropriate to, as each candidate gives their response first, and then allow a question from the council at that time. Because in my mind, if we say candidate A, gives their response, Councilman Townsend has a question, I ask the question to their response. That gives candidate B and C opportunity to further formulate their response, which I believe may be an injustice to keeping it equal in time to come up with a response.
I guess I was envisioning just an opportunity at the very end.
Okay.
If after all the candidates have answered all of these questions, any council members have questions they want to ask of those candidates or of all of the candidates, then at that point we would have the opportunity to ask questions. If we ask questions after every answer, we could be here for a week.
And that is actually how the previous formats have gone, exactly like that, Councilmember.
So run through the questions, 3 minutes response per candidate, and then at that time we would ask, that's the purpose of the paper that we have up here, is to jot down our questions, their responses, and then ask at the end. Okay.
One other thing, I do like giving them the opportunity to introduce themselves, just because I feel like you see a lot of personality in that introduction that you might not see in the business nature of these other questions. That's my opinion.
Having done it, many of you probably did it. I think a couple of you have done that. That introduction is a little calming because this is stressful, sitting out there getting that question asked of you, especially for me being the first time doing something like that. I think it kind of calms your nerves before you roll into the questions, having to answer those on the fly. And depending on the responses, we may forego the final last 3 minutes, giving your final comments. I guess we can gauge it that evening. Mr. Holman?
Yeah, I'd like to add a question. The question would be, what is your plan to bring an Olive Garden to Raymore? And if you fail in that quest, what is your plan to bring a Red Lobster? Third choice being Bed Bath & Beyond, and like specifics on that. So if we could throw that one in there, I think it kind of really let us know what that person's meant, because we have all failed at that one.
Yeah, we have.
We got somebody that's got a good plan. We know we've hit a solid home run with that.
Who do you know at the Olive Garden corporate offices?
So if I'm hearing kind of a consensus here, so the order of the questions would be 3, 4, 6, 5, 7, a combined 8, 9, 2 and 1. And then closing with 3 minutes to close out. And the 3 minutes for them to introduce themselves to the council.
Yes. I did have one that I highlighted, Mayor's Economic Development Host Team. The mayor did that the last time. He probably added that. I don't know what that is. Do we have that in existence?
Not anymore, sir.
Okay.
I can go ahead and get rid of that one as well. The, we still have three. We still have three.
Okay.
We'll actually add the Arts Commission to this. We'll remove that one. The Mayor's Economic Development Host Team was the group that basically partnered with the Chamber of Commerce at ribbon cuttings. It was reduced in the last several years to just being the mayor, who still attends as many of those as is possible. But yeah, we can get rid. In fact, it didn't really exist when these questions were being asked the last time.
Understood. Because I know with Mr. Gress and team, you all have a specific group that deals with those type of things that he does, and this was not that group that Mr. Gress uses for?
No.
Okay, that's what I
No,
thought.
that's actually the Economic Development Team.
Okay, that's what I thought. All righty. And I think you all were hosting them at mixers and such. If there are no more questions on this agenda item, are there any items on the other?
I just have one item, sir, for a meeting that I know has gone fairly long. Just wanted to remind the council, as I did at your meeting 2 weeks ago, that this month is a little bit goofy as far as meetings are concerned of the council. So next week on the 14th, you have your regular meeting. The following Monday night on the 21st, you have your special meeting to address regular meeting items rather than that being a work session, so that we can have 2 regular meetings in the month. Then the Tuesday night following that on the 22nd is our economic development tour of the 3 locations here in town. And
What time was that again?
it begins at 5:30 at
5:30.
Compass Health.
Compass Health, okay.
Yes. And then on the 28th, you will be presiding officer for the interviews of the candidates rather than having the regular meeting that would normally be on that night. So it will also be a special meeting.
Understood.
Just wanted to keep all of that in front of the council. I'll repeat it again next week because it is a little bit confusing.
Yes, it is.
Certainly, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me? That is correct.
If there are no more items on the other, it looks like we have a cause to go into executive session.
We do not, sir. I removed that. We did 1 year ago at the first work session in June, but we do not tonight. Although I will say, I might start putting real estate acquisition as an executive session on all the agendas because it really gets folks' attention.
It does. We haven't had them for a while, and I think one council's meeting, we adjourned and we were just out talking amongst ourselves. You had made a comment that it's been a while since we've been in executive session, and we kind of missed it. And then, wouldn't you know, the next council meeting, it was an executive meeting item on the agenda.
I am sorry, sir. And just as a note, the reason I left it this way rather than going back to the work session is this is the only work session for this particular month. Thought we'd kind of ease you back into the seating arrangements. So we will be back in regular work session format for the meeting in July.
Excellent. All righty, sir. Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Holman?
Yes, sir. I would like to make a comment. So item C, Senate Bill 153, which was delivered to us by the legislature, which I would describe as a stomach punch, followed by a 2x4 to the side of the head. That one was just, I had to wrap my head around that one for about the next 2 items as we went through the process. But then I got to thinking kind of along the lines of Apollo 13. This may be our finest hour because we've had setbacks like this before. And if there's any city in the state that's poised to handle this, it's us. Same thing happened with COVID. We were really concerned what was going to happen with that loss of tax revenue, and we came through that okay, considering we really did. We didn't take nearly the hit that a lot of others do because we have the right people in the right place at the right time. And we have a lot of good things going for us, and we've had to work our way through these labyrinths before, and we have exceptional help from our legal department. After I thought that way, bring it on. I said, bring it on. We're going to be okay with this, and we're going to work through it. We're not going to let this slow us down. I know Mr. Fearborn will not let this slow him or the team down.
No.
Thought we better end on a high note tonight, sir.
There you go. And to use your movie themes, these are the Avengers. We got somebody, I don't know who's Captain America. You pick who's going to be, pick a character. But yeah, we have an outstanding crew of staff members and everyone, the ability to make it happen. I mean, at all the different events that I go to, and your Raymores is, okay, how do you do what you do? Mr. Gress, Mr. Cataract, Mr. Crass, it's always a outstanding resource of information. So I'm fully confident that we have the capacity and the capability and the professional knowledge to navigate this environment that we've just been thrust into for the next few years. So I look forward to seeing what they bring before us. Mr. Circle.
And with that, remember, we do have the great Oz running our city, so we're good. We're good.
If there is no more, then we stand adjourned. Thank you.